afternoon's Tuesday morning, Monday night football edition. Yes, normally I am here all by my lonesome, but guess what? Hey, the Giants played last night, so I had to bring in my boy Adam Armbrecht here because, I mean, what a game by the Giants. They may not have won, but in my opinion, they should have because they dominated this game basically start to finish except for one person giving the ball away, literally, to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Adam, what are your just overall general thoughts from watching last night's game?
Well, listen, on the One Giant podcast, when we talk about this coming into the season, expectations were let's start to really effectively, in a positive way, start the rebuild for this franchise because there's been a lot of sputtering. That's what this year is. This is about a rebuild. It's about growing pains. You're going to see it. There's a ton of positives. Yes, you can easily look at Daniel Jones and say, hey, two really bad, ugly interceptions there. But at the end of the day, I soak up all of the positives from this game. I think about, regardless of how Daniel Jones had turnovers, what were the expectations coming into this thing? We were talking about blowout, 31-10, not even a game to talk about. And the Giants led at halftime. So they're still learning. They're still learning what it is to take leads from halftime and finish through the third and fourth quarters. But more positives than negatives for me. And it was just great to see an entertaining, interesting, exciting game all the way down to the last play.
A lot of people might have been surprised that Tampa Bay was only held to 25 points against the Giants. But quite frankly, the Giants D, even though they have had their struggles at times this season, overall, they played pretty darn well against some pretty good competition this season. And they showed up, especially in that first half where, Brady would have them in the scoring territory and, the bend but don't break. Give up those 3-point field goals. Don't allow the touchdowns. Give your offense a chance to win the game. And they did that the entire game.
Yeah, listen, especially against the team in Tampa Bay, who when they get in the red zone, they've been very good at converting for touchdowns. So to your point, yes, they got in there a handful of times, but you were able to hold them in check for most of this game. Ultimately, when you go inside the stats, and by the way, the reason why the bend but don't break and then sometimes ultimately break late in games for this defense, we don't have a starting second cornerback. Ryan Lewis, who was inconsistent at best, was getting the starting reps. He didn't play in this game. Brought back in Yadam to start, who had been benched after the first few weeks of the season. So it's a real mixed bag there. Patrick Graham is getting the most out of this defense. He still needs more players. You still need more personnel in order to get this job done, suffering injuries in that linebacking core as well over the last handful of weeks. But dude, go inside the stats here. Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones combined, and even the entire backfield, if you want to throw in Scotty Miller, they combined for a total of 81 rushing yards in this game. In the first half especially, they really shut down that running game first. That was checkbox number one for this defense. Then you try to mitigate all the explosive weapons. Go inside the receiving numbers. Nobody had more than 5 catches, and the best receiver, best player on the field in Mike Evans had the late touchdown, and that's what clinched it there for Tampa. But 5 for 55, including that touchdown catch on 7 targets. That's Bradbury matching up. You really, listen, there's a handful of key plays, especially when you look on Tampa Bay's offensive side of the ball, that little seam route that Gronkowski ran for a nice third down conversion. They're in there, but yeah, the game script went against everything that Tampa probably thought they were going to be able to execute against. You still come up short, but again, positives, man. Giants fans, positivity coming out of this thing.
Couple interesting and questionable penalties were called or not called during this game. Yep. Obviously, the biggest one that everybody remembers and everybody talks about is that 2-point conversion. They're like, oh, it's a pass interference. In my opinion, yes, if you watch that in slow-mo, yeah, it's obvious pass interference. But in real time, it's like this, Mm-hmm. So I really can't. Whereas if you go and look at that personal foul, unnecessary roughness, lowering the head, that was a god-awful call. I mean, that defender could not have played that any better than what he did.
And that's Yadam there on the right sideline there. And all he's trying to do is brace himself for impact. He doesn't lower it in and try to go in at the receiver. The receiver lowers his head, and he's fine to do that. But all he's trying to do is brace himself. And you know what's weird about it to me is, so we'll touch on both of these. The pass interference or non-call gets picked up. I'm of the mindset of this. You threw the flag. I think it should have just been left to stand, right? If you hadn't thrown the flag, I would have said, listen, it's incidental, and that's what happens. Mm-hmm. You want to go super micro on it, and they mentioned in the broadcast, if Daniel Jones puts that out towards the pylon, then one, Lewis can probably catch it clean without even worrying about the defender. And then if the defender is going to hit him because he's going to be even a little half a yard further away, then it makes the call a lot cleaner. So difficult one to take, but just because it happened at the end of the game doesn't mean that's the deciding factor. On that other one, it's frustrating because, so what's weird about it is for the referees to make that call there and not seem to get into the fine intricacies of the play on the defensive pass, defensive roughing, unnecessary roughness, and then get into the intricacies at the end of the game. That's what's weird. And that's where I think if you're a Giants fan, maybe you're frustrated because you'd like to see the referees huddle up and say, boy, he was just lowering himself to brace. The receiver initiates the contact. You're never going to call offensive unnecessary roughness, but at the very least, pick up the flag, say no foul on the play, and then you kind of understand the one at the back end. So imbalance in terms of how the referees looked in this one, in my opinion, and that's true around the NFL on a lot of Sundays.
You're still here? Awesome. Thanks for watching this stream. Please, if you have a moment of your time, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel so you're notified next time I go live. And if you got a few extra seconds, hit that description down there below the video and check out all the places that you can follow me, whether it be Sportscaster here on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and there's a couple places where you can help donate to my channel. That way I can continue to bring all this content to you. Thank you for your support. Now, let's get back to the video. Well, I mean, there was another pass interference called against, I believe it was Bradbury.
Yeah, around the waist there, the player.
And that was something I think shouldn't have been called because it didn't look like he was really impeding the receiver at all. Yes, it looked like he had him wrapped up, but he really wasn't touching him. His arm was around him, but it really wasn't bothering him at all. And there was a couple times where Bradbury was looking back for the ball when the ball was in the air. So I don't see that as a pass interference. And yet the one in the 2-point conversion it just made no sense to me on how these referees were calling these pass interferences.
Yeah, that's the inconsistency. And again, the pass interference call in the 2-point conversion, you say, boy, the defender didn't get his head around. Now they say, oh, but the ball hit him in his arm. That's great. But you always talk about if your head's back at the quarterback, then that's how you avoid it. If it's not back there, that's when you get hit with it. So again, inconsistencies. Bradbury was hit with 2 pass interference penalties. The one where he had his arm there. And again, I tend to agree with you. He wasn't actually holding him. Maybe just puts himself in a bad visual spot by having the arm there. The other one was what ended up putting the ball down inside the 5-yard line, where I'm going to forget who it was for Tampa Bay on the right sideline, looks for him in the end zone. And I think it was Mickens, if I'm not mistaken. He had had some nice looking plays there, 5 catches for 36 overall. Even that one, again, just in terms of consistency from the referees, I would have thought you would have huddled up and said, boy, that ball got thrown narrowly touching the backside of the end zone. I don't even know if that was a catchable ball. It's hard because Bradbury's a little bit behind him and his arm is there. That's far more reasonable than the other one. But, listen, it happens. And at the end of the day, there's plenty of other things to point in this game that lead to a Giants loss, as frustrating as those moments may have been.
Another thing that to me stands out big time is Jones is the leading rusher on the Giants. And this kid is dangerous when he just tucks the ball and runs, and yet he doesn't do this until the final drive in order to get that first down of the game. Do you think possibly maybe there was a few times where he should have just tucked it and ran, where some opportunities probably showed up rather than possibly I'll just ask it just straight there, and then we'll go into the next thing.
Well, I would say so, and a lot of Giants fans look at Jason Garrett. A lot of time, a big talking point the following morning is, the play calling and what didn't he do or did he do? And they even had that late in this one with a run play. They ended up converting ultimately on a big 4th and 16. We're able to move the chains on a number of times there. But if you think about it in microcosm of the 2 interceptions that Jones threw, and then combine it with the one on the final drive when he hits Slayton to convert and move the chains, it's all really similar there. And I think these are the teaching moments for Garrett when it comes to Daniel Jones. On the 2 interceptions, maybe your point. Now, you didn't see designed run plays. Last 2 weeks, big design run plays that totally surprised. They had one in this game, actually, but it went only for about 7 or 8 yards, little pickup. 3 rushes, 20 yards for Daniel Jones. Again, 2 elements. You're protecting the quarterback. You're also protecting a young offensive line that's still learning. So sometimes when you do those big design run plays, they end up coming back on a holding penalty. They end up, getting, mitigated by a mistake by a young team. But on both interceptions, what you're looking for him to do there is take that ball down, go ahead and fall forward for a yard or 2, even maybe lose a yard or 2, and just live to play another down. On the conversion that he made, he actually, when he's in that pocket, he could have stepped up and worked himself forward and to the right and maybe would have been able to run. Now he ends up converting it. It's about as 50-50 a ball as he had with the interceptions. And he actually backs himself out of the pocket and almost into a sack. So this is the mental game that's going on right now. It's the mental growth where he wants to do it all. He wants to find that play. And I think a lot of young quarterbacks suffer from this. And it's hard because he's done it somewhat consistently here. It's just, buddy, there's another play. There's another play coming as long as you don't turn it over. As long as you don't make the big mistake. The little mistake is a sack for 2-yard loss. The big mistake is the interception that changes field position that gives Tom Brady and the Bucs a chance to get more points.
In the first half of the game, at halftime, the Giants were leading 14-6. In the pregame show that we were talking, I said the only chance I see the Giants winning is if Garrett draws up a whole lot of plays where Daniel Jones is throwing like Tom Brady. He is getting the ball out of his hands quickly and just picking up your 5, 6, 7, 8 yard quick passes. And that seems like what was going on in the first half, how the Giants was mitigating this bad offensive line, for him, and just getting the ball out of his hands really quickly. It looked like they had Tampa kind of on the defensive, so to speak, in that first half. Why wouldn't they just continue doing that in the second? It seemed like Jones was holding the ball a lot longer in the second half rather than what he was doing in the first half.
Yeah. So, at one point, I think coming out of the first half where I believe he was 11 for 17, but 10 of 13 on passes that he got out of his hand in under 2.5 seconds. So to your point, right? Quick release, find that hot route and go. Now the adjustments getting made on the other side. So now you talk about, and by the way, even early in this game, there were a couple of passes that were getting completed where they're trying to undercut. Tampa Bay is looking to take these risks. Now it left them potentially exposed. On the interception to the right side, the first one, blown coverage on the left. I don't put it on Daniel Jones not to see that because you don't in pre-snap. And they said this in the post game. I think it was Slayton who said, he goes, yeah, but we don't anticipate the guy falling down or blowing the coverage. Like, it's not like, hey, when he totally leaves you wide open, then I'll throw you the ball. So, that's kind of the neither here nor there. But what ends up happening is I mentioned Sterling Shepard. They miss on a connection down the left side where Shepard is looking back a little bit too soon. So you can't run as fast when your head's turned around as keeping it forward. That's predicated on the offensive line not always giving Daniel Jones enough time. So now the timing of the receiver and the quarterback gets thrown off at well. So that's an overthrown ball, quote unquote, that really is about timing and having consistency out there on the outside. The other big touchdown play that Slayton came right out and said in the postgame, that's on me. Lost the ball, didn't follow through on my route. That could have been a big touchdown pass that puts Daniel Jones up in around 300 passing yards. And even with the 2 picks, 3-2, you live with that. The Giants consistently took their shots. And even, in the postgame, Judge said, it's volume shots here where we're trying to take our looks. They weren't hitting on a number of them. And at some point, you have to make, again, adjustments from Tampa Bay's defense. Yes. And at some point, you have to say, if we keep going to this well of trying to take these shots, we're going to end up throwing a deep interception potentially, or we're going to find ourselves in the 3rd and longs. One of the really nice things that complemented in the first half was the combined rushing efforts of old man Alfred Morris and then Wayne Gallman, who's been on this roster, 12 for 44, 3.7 yards. Nothing to write home about, but 3.5 from Alfred Morris as well. They rushed in total as a team for 101 yards. that was putting them in 2nd and 6s and 3rd and 5s. And that's not a place that the Giants have lived. When you do that, then those shots become more available. In the second half, as you're trying to maintain a lead, then trying to get back into it, they were set up in more 3rd and longs. It's harder to run what your game script looks like if you don't take advantage of those 1st and 2nd down rushing opportunities.
When you look at the overall statistics of this game, where Tampa Bay and the Giants both pretty much had almost equal time of possession, the score is darn near equal, 23-25. The yards per play were dead even at 5.2 yards per play for both. Passing yards, rushing yards, all very, very close. Total yards was 344 to 357. This is what a lot of people consider one of the most dangerous offenses in the NFL versus what a lot of people, the Giants were listed probably the worst offense in the NFL overall. And yet they were able to keep things even with the Buccaneers. Is this a really good sign moving forward for the rest of the season? Or do you think that it's still the New York Giants lucky to win maybe 3 games this year?
Oh, well, this year specifically, yes. Listen, look at in the short term, when I line up as good as Burrow has looked out there in Cincinnati, we're going to have Washington, Philadelphia, and then the Bengals before we get into the Seahawks and the Cardinals. These next 3 games are all very winnable games because you're not talking about a Tom Brady. I mean, the slew of veterans on that side of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not only on the field, but on their coaching staff as well. Incredibly experienced. So the fact that you come up short in this isn't surprising. Go back over these last handful of games as well. Lost to Dallas by 3, won Washington by a point, lost to the Eagles by a point, lost to the Bucs by 2 points. So the Giants are in these games, and unlike last year where they were doing some window dressing late in games and getting a late score that took it from a 13-point deficit to a 6, and you go, oh, we lost by a single score. Not really. You were down 2 scores most of the way. They've been in these games over the course of this season, and yes, especially on the defensive side of the ball, you can look at this team, and what you like about it from that standpoint is, you only saw about 6% in terms of snaps, only a handful. Carter Coughlin got his first sack here, combining with Cam Brown. Those are 2 later round rookies that the Giants drafted and got a little bit of a run in this game. You think about Bradbury is brought in. He's on a 3-year deal. You think about Blake Martinez. He's in on a 3-year deal as well. So there are a lot of components at each level that make a lot of sense. What happens on the defensive line there, where Tomlinson is up for a contract at the end of this season, where Leonard Williams is playing on a franchise tag? Decisions around that are going to be important, but this defensive unit is really only a premier edge rusher, pure guy there in a 3-4 system that can really get consistently home on the quarterback. That's going to change the dynamic, and then you look for a cornerback as well. But over the remaining games here, there's some winnable ones. Do I think that the Giants are going to get beyond that? Because as I mentioned, not to filibuster here, but once they get to the Seahawks and the Cardinals, it's followed up by the Browns, the Ravens, and then finishing with the Cowboys. So while the next 3 games are very winnable, every game after that, excluding maybe Dallas, is a game that you think you're going to be in as underdog with teams playing for a lot. Not unlike Tampa Bay, and they could be close losses, but they'll probably still be losses. This is a team that's probably going to live in 4, maybe 5 win range by the end of the year. And that's a good thing. Everything fundamentally looks better this year than it did from last season.
Coming into this game, a former Giant, Jason Pierre-Paul, said he was going to wreck the New York Giants on his homecoming. And he had a couple plays in there where he really made his presence felt. What was your thoughts on Pierre's game against the Giants?
Yeah, listen, left side of the line there where he's doing his work, that's where we had Shane Lemieux getting his first start of his career. In spite of the fact that he and Thomas collectively allowed 9 pressures on Daniel Jones, the eye test, as we say, looked pretty good there. Thomas looked more consistent than he has over the course of his rookie season as well. It's interesting. If you want to talk about, hey, you're coming for the necks, I believe it's something that Jason Pierre-Paul used, ironically having had a serious neck injury that could have shortened his career even after he left New York and went to Tampa Bay. I thought they mitigated it for the most part. Now, what I will say is, as this game got into the later stages, you saw Ndamukong Suh and Pierre-Paul starting to get there with consistency, starting to get pressure more quickly on Daniel Jones. I wanted to just see if I could pull up. Jason Pierre-Paul had 5 solo tackles in this, had the 1 sack, had 2 for a loss, just the 1 QB hit. It's not a bad stat line by any stretch of the imagination. This is a guy who I think has up over now that puts him about 27 sacks since 2018 and joining the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, just about 55 over his first 7 seasons with New York. So he's looked better. He's playing in a complementary system. It was a strong game from him, but I'm relatively impressed the way he was mitigated, all things being considered, by this young offensive line. He's a good player. He had a nice game, but I did have my concerns coming in of looking at a stat line where you go 3 QB hits, 2 QB sacks, maybe a strip fumble. Like, I thought that this could have been a real wreck-it kind of game. And overall, I walk away about it saying, thanks so much. Continue to have a great time down there, Pierre. And I'm glad that we looked at least relatively competent taking on a really strong defensive front, one of many that the Giants have faced in the first half of this season.
There was a play where I believe it was Evan Ingram that was running the football, and Daniel Jones ran out in front, and I think it was Raheem Nochez that he blocked.
Yep.
Monster defensive tackle. My goodness, what are your thoughts about your starting quarterback and whom you think is going to be your franchise guy moving on, going out there and putting his body on the line in front of a guy who's 350?
Listen, 6'5", 220. The man's got some mass to him, right? Again, not unlike the design run plays, you want to mitigate risk there. But this is what I like about the late touchdown to Golden Tate. It shows that Daniel Jones has the touch and has the deep accuracy. It's consistency that you're concerned with and you want to see him grow in. But even a play like that, they said at the end of the game, Daniel Jones is beating himself up right now harder than anybody else is. And on that play, all he wants to do is get out in front and give his guy a chance to get some more yardage. I always applaud it. I hate it if they get injured, and I hate anybody in the league. You hate to see it, but you love that type of effort from your quarterback, and that is a footnote developmental piece about being a leader. And everybody, in the back end of the game, Peppers came out when they asked him about it, and he said, "Listen, we're not out there getting, I'll clean it up, butts kicked." He said, we're playing hard. We believe that we are growing. We are getting better. We are improving. Slayton takes responsibility on certain things. Slayton steps up and says, we believe that Daniel Jones can be able to throw. Is that, saying the right PR thing? Maybe. But I truly believe that the collective core of this team really does believe in one another and believes what they're building with under Joe Judge. So a little play like that is how in the film room come Tuesday, you go, boy, you really wish you hadn't thrown those 2 picks, but also look what you are doing. Look how you're staying in the game, staying engaged in the game, and not allowing those turnovers to take you out of it, where then you don't make that late touchdown pass and at least give a chance to be back involved.
Well, one thing we can say is that Daniel Jones, after probably being scolded at after those first 2 interceptions and that last drive, he threw the ball away. It was the first time I've seen him do it. I was like, oh, my God, he finally learned. Do you think that this might actually carry over for the rest of his career, maybe this season, finally understanding, hey, sometimes I just got to live to play in the next down?
Well, so here's the ironic thing, or the from a Giants fan perspective, you can go back to week 1. He threw a bad interception, and in the next series, he threw that ball away. A couple weeks later, similar thing, learn from whatever. Daniel Jones is learning within the games. Now it's about carrying it over from week. Yeah, exactly. That's the weird thing about it. And again, it falls in this mindset of, I want to make the big play. I want to do it, and I want to get it done. So yes, it's always encouraging because you know that he gets it. You know that he understands. You know that he's doing the right thing. Now it's just about, and by the way, this is what Eli Manning suffered from late in his career. And he understood it. He was like, listen, I'm not gonna get killed out here. I'm going to chuck this thing away. But consistency from the offensive line is crucial, because then Daniel Jones feels comfortable holding onto the ball and making the right read or getting rid of it. It's about knowing when the pressure is going to come to you. So even last night, where the line did play pretty consistent in front of him, he's got 7 other weeks where it hasn't been consistent, where he's been getting his butt kicked, where you have Thomas surrendering over 40 pressures from the left tackle position on his blind side. Those things are all in his mind. So wanting to make the big, when he finally gets a chance to hang in and make a big play, He's trying to do everything he can to make the big play because he doesn't know if the next one is going to be where he gets totally blindsided. He coughs up a strip fumble, and then we're talking about how, Daniel Jones can't get ball security. Yeah, guess what? A lot of quarterbacks don't have that ability when you're getting nailed by 350-pound defensive linemen. So the growth is there, and now it is about carrying it over long-term here. This is the midway point, by the way. I'm sure you do this with the Colts as well, right? Midway point of the season. Let's take a look, see what we like, see what we don't like. And now let's take a look at that next 8-game sample size and see how that compares at the end of the year. That's where you got to live with that with Daniel Jones and this team as a whole.
With Daniel Jones, I think the one thing that he really needs to get under his belt and understand is the flow of the game. All right.
Yes.
I get trying to go for it if you're down and out in the game and you really got to come for, try to close in. But when you are in a game or leading, as we saw last night, it is much better just to throw it away rather than have the chance at an interception. And this is something it's up here. He's got to understand that flow. Otherwise, there will be game situations later on that you need him to do this, but you've been pounding it in his head, throw it away. And then he ends up throwing it away, but you're down 21 points in the fourth quarter. There's game flow that he's really got to get down.
Yes. No, it's a fantastic point, Lawrence, because beyond the interceptions, it's about when it was happening and what was happening in the game. You're winning the game. Your defense is controlling Tampa Bay's offense right now. That means that you're entering into the field position battle. Let's go ahead and keep putting them inside their 20. That's okay. That's a net win. Let's give our defense a lot of field to work with where they can try to continue to slow them down, hold them to field goal opportunities, and we can build from there. There's a morale piece to it too, right? It's deflating to the offense. It's deflating to the defense when they get a stop, and then you have to turn back around and try to ramp it back up immediately. So that's a big proponent of it. And then to your point too, when you're down late in the fourth quarter, guess what? You can throw picks then. When you're down 2 scores, it's okay. That's when we want you to grip it and rip it and don't hold on to it. So yes, mental awareness of in the first quarter, second quarter, when we're in the game, we're up 14-6 going towards halftime. Don't risk anything. When you're in the early third quarter, don't risk anything. Then when you get late in games, that's when you can rip it. So that's about taking those sacks instead of the interceptions, throwing it away, even taking an intentional grounding. That's all right. Do any of those things that you want and just avoid the big turnover mistakes, because there was a point in this game when the Giants were winning the turnover battle, and that was one of the key components of maybe staying in this thing. As you throw the picks, as they take over the turnover battle, it shifts. Finally, a big play to Evans, 25-17. You're behind, and now you're behind the 8 ball, and still showed the ability to execute getting down the field there.
All right, so I want to thank Yankee Mary 45, National Love 95, Summers, what's going on, Summers, and Cubs Rock, out of 65 people that are watching currently right now. Before we end this, is there any finishing final thoughts about this game that you would like to get out?
Yeah, well, I'd like to remind people that if you want all these great final thoughts, feel free to subscribe and make a profile here. You can use the hashtag SCNNFL. You can obviously follow Lawrence, Owen, and myself doing our thing. No, this is a growth project. My pushback, and you and I have talked about this with Ray, I think the Colts fan base is a much more steady, usually middle of the country is a little bit more patient with how things go. The coasts have a harder time. This is what this is. It's the rebuild, friends. Take the positives, look for the negatives to be improved upon, but that's the expectations. Be happy that you played with a team that's going to go on a deep playoff run and you went toe-to-toe with them, not playing your cleanest game. Last footnote I would mention is the Giants have played relatively clean overall. They did have 7 penalties in this game. That's what will cost a team that is not as good from a talent standpoint. You got to play clean football, protect the football. That's what you look for going forward, and get excited. 2 more division games just around the bend here.
Well, thanks for giving me that extra time on a day that you weren't supposed to be here with me. Your insight was very valuable, not only to myself, but everyone watching. So thanks again. Probably see you when Thursday?
Yeah, you and I will be back on doing Thursday night preview for the matchup there, and then we'll come back in on Friday with our post-game wrap-up, and OGP will be doing the stream on Friday as well. Man, you can find me. Thank you for having me in. Always happy to do it for Lawrence Owen. Follow his work Colts fans, check him out. He's doing film study. He's breaking it down for you. It's incredibly insightful stuff. So be sure to be giving him the looks as well. It's not just about me.
Man, give Adam a follow. Come on. All right. Follow him on Twitter. Follow him here. Follow him wherever that he's at. You can find him. Click on his what is it? Your Adam Armbrecht channel, right?
Yeah. Find me there. You can see the NBA content, the NFL content, the Giant content, the Nets content. It's here for you, friends. I could pat myself on the back all day. Thank you for having me in. Let's get a win here next week, Big Blue.
All right. See you guys for the second half of the NFL season. Have a good one.